Good morning, everybody. Welcome to today's Workshop Wednesday webinar, Personal Data Security. My name is Jacob Wilson, and I'm excited to be facilitating today's webinar. With us today is Mike Mason, the bank's Information Security Officer. Mike is one of the bank's top IT experts with a focus on cybersecurity. He wears many hats, including presenting in person and virtually throughout Alaska on topics such as this one, to help individuals and businesses stay safe in a world that is more connected now than ever before. Good morning, Mike. Can you hear me all right?
Good morning, Jacob. Sure can.
Great. Now, I'm excited to turn things over to Mike, but before we do, I'm hoping you can help me out and test one of our features. At the bottom of your screen, you're going to see a question and answer feature. If you wouldn't mind heading down there and just saying hi or good morning in one of those questions, I would appreciate it just to make sure that is working for us. And while you're doing that, Mike, I'm hoping you could just give us a little bit on your background and your experience in the information security field, as well as here at First National.
Sure thing, Jacob. My background, I'm a lifelong nerd. Got started playing computer games at a very young age, and unreformed, unrepentant computer nerd here with First National for the last 15 years. Currently, I'm the information security officer. In a previous role, I was a product support manager and section head overseeing payment systems and dealing with many of the same things that my new role now also includes. So I've actually given a version of speeches similar to this for business customers related to risks, fraud, and preventing those risks from mitigating those risks for many years. I think my first presentation on that topic was around 2011. So I have a deep history and personal background in fraud prevention and securing systems. So I think that's probably enough about me.
No, we appreciate it. Thank you. That background helps paint the picture why you're here and presenting to us today. So before we get started, would you mind just giving us maybe a 30,000 foot view on what we're going to discuss today and why it's relevant to everyone that's
Sure
on?
thing. Yeah, absolutely. So for personal data security being the topic of the day, we'll start with an overall digital landscape. As we all know, the world is becoming more and more interconnected, and there are more participants in the online marketplace than ever before. We'll then cover the current threat environment and how things are evolving in this space. We'll cover common fraud scams, tactics and techniques used by fraudsters, and how to protect yourself.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. So as I mentioned, we do have that question and answer feature at the bottom of your screen. And I encourage you to use that as much as possible today. These presentations are much better if we can change them into a discussion. And really, this is your opportunity to ask one of Alaska's top cybersecurity experts anything on your list. My one request is that you don't include any personal information with any question that you ask throughout the presentation. So with that, Mike, I'm going to turn it over to you. Get started.
Thanks for that, Jacob. And I'll just echo you. Please do ask any questions you have, burning topics. I may hold off on answering the question until an appropriate slide if it's something we have planned to discuss. But I love getting live questions from the audience. It always makes things a little more dynamic and engaging. So without further ado, I wanted to talk about the digital landscape. And kicking things off, there's a topic, a term you may have heard out in the news media and elsewhere called the Internet of Things, or you might see it abbreviated as IoT, or you might see it as smart devices. And what is that? What is this Internet of Things? When you think of the internet, you might think of your laptop or your tablet, but do you think of your smart TV? Or that refrigerator or other appliance that's suddenly connected to your Wi-Fi? because if those things are connected to the internet, they're processing or exchanging data online, then they could be a target of attack. And one statistic that I've seen was that 75% of all devices are expected to be IoT or Internet of Things devices by 2030. So it's certainly pertinent to this conversation. Now, I'd mentioned the world is becoming more and more interconnected. We have just over 8 billion people in the world, and over 5 billion of those individuals are using the internet. They have some sort of device connected and an identity. And those identities can be the targets of attack. So when you look at the past 2 decades and the growth of users on the internet, your attack surface has multiplied by 5 from 1 billion to over 5 billion potential targets. What this means is that fraudsters, scammers, the bad guys have 5 times more the opportunity to try to make money off of crime. So getting right into the threat environment, there's something that I like to call the cybercrime economy. And I'm not just making something up when I talk about the cybercrime economy. It's a real thing. It's facilitated by something that is colloquially known as the dark web, which is actually essentially a hidden internet you access via the Tor network. And you can't get to it from a normal browser. If you go into your browser and try to browse to a dark website, you're not going to get there. You have to use special methods to access the dark web, and those special methods are designed to anonymize the users. So people with bad intent in the dark web can host things like cybercrime forums, where they offer up for sale stolen credit card data or other information that are used to facilitate crimes. And they organize and connect with other criminals and actually conduct crimes as a team. So this has radically lowered the barrier to entry for would-be fraudsters and enabled people to connect together to commit crimes they never could have done on their own.
Mike, I just want to pause here just one moment before we go on to the next slide. Now, we've actually seen the dark web mentioned in some headlines recently in the news concerning the AT&T data breach. Would you mind talking to that just for a moment as an example of how the dark web is used?
Sure, sure. So the AT&T data breach or the AT&T data set, whichever way you want to refer to it as, is essentially more than 70 million consumer records. So that is huge, a huge number of individual identities. It included personal information such as name, phone number, email address, passcodes, social security number, date of birth, just all the things you don't want someone to have about your identity. Records and reporting shows that it was originally shopped around on the dark web around 2019. This huge data set was offered up for sale for $1 million. It's since then cropped up several more times in different factors in different ways. Most recently, it hit the headlines over the past weekend, the last couple of weeks here, related to actually being offered not on the dark web, but there's now a public facing internet website that bad guys can go to and purchase records from that data set. So it's even easier to access now than it was when it was hidden on the dark web. So again, the dark web is kind of a hidden internet where the users are anonymized. You can't tell who any individual user is. And they use special techniques to try to hide the origin of the transmissions of data. And then you have illegal underground markets on the public web as well. So you have the dark web, which is hidden, and then you have public websites, which are not hidden, both of which can be illicit. It's a good question.
Thank you for that. Appreciate
Yeah.
it.
So
I just want to get into one more point before
sure.
we move on the dark web. And that is, I was hoping you could talk a little bit more of, it seems like, well, if these hackers and criminals have access to the dark web and they can communicate, purchase even these bits of code and data, how are we not monitoring that? It seems like the FBI could also log on to that and monitor it. So how
Well,
does
I'm
that work?
I'm certain that various law enforcement agencies absolutely are monitoring aspects of the dark web. You also have security researchers monitoring the dark web. Your bank might pay for a service to have their vendors monitor the dark web to identify have any of their customer records or card numbers been leaked on the dark web. I had mentioned discussing cybercrime forums. Many of those forums started out as carding forums where these bad guys would steal consumer credit card numbers and PIN codes and expiration dates, everything you need from the card to create a fake card. And then they would publish them and sell them on these cybercrime forums. So, law enforcement will monitor for those types of postings. If there's a mistake made by the bad guy that allows them to be de-anonymized, they have been identified and in some cases arrested or warrants put out for their arrest. If they enter a non-extradition country, they could be subject to arrest. Um, in many cases, the FBI will seize dark web forum servers. So if they manage to identify the bad guy and take over their infrastructure, recently several very large ransomware operations have been disrupted by international efforts coordinated with US and foreign law enforcement agencies. Sometimes the bad guys will pull an exit scam. So they'll pretend they got taken down by law enforcement and go run away with the money. So you can't trust what you see on the dark web, nor should you really trust much of what you see online, but that's a different topic. So um, these cybercrime forums, the fact that they've organized together to commit crimes as a team has led to something I call fraud as a service. So many of you use software as a service, whether you know it or not. If you have a free online email provider, that's software as a service. If you use Microsoft Office 365, instead of having downloaded Microsoft Word as its own program on your computer, maybe you can access a Word document right through your browser through O365. That's software as a service. And computer companies have discovered that they can more efficiently provide services by hosting them online and piecing out the parts that their customers need as a subscription. Well, fraudsters have found that they too can more efficiently commit fraud by offering the pieces of conducting their crimes as a service to their customers, which are other criminals. So you have hackers placing themselves for hire. You have botnets for rent. A botnet, by the way, is a network of devices that have been hijacked and essentially turned into robots that work for the hacker who took over those devices. So when that hacker hires out their services, they go and hack a bunch of devices, they take control of those devices, and then they post a thing on a cybercrime forum saying, "Hey, do you want to rent this botnet? $100 an hour." And other people who are less technical can then purchase that service and use it to send out spam emails, send phishing email, try to take websites offline, do all sorts of nasty things. And you have malware by the license. So you can pay a lease to get access to a virus or a ransomware service or some other hacking tool. Malicious software is what malware means. And then you can then go hack without being a hacker. So this is really what has lowered the barrier to entry, as I mentioned previously, for these would-be fraudsters. It's no longer like the 1990s movie Hacker, where you have all these smart kids coding the programs to write the viruses to do things. The fraudsters of today just go pay that person. So they've really split up all of the different job duties and separated them into different roles. The person who steals the money is different from the person who launders the money, is different from the person who wrote the virus that got into the network to allow the money to be stolen. So it really has increased the level of sophistication of the different fraud schemes that are possible. This has also led to an explosion in common scams because, again, those barriers to entry have been lowered for this crime market. So you have advance fee fraud, where you might see someone sends you a certain amount of money and asks you to return a portion back to them. Maybe they sent you a check that was an overpayment. Or on the flip side of that, you have the Nigerian prince scam. Hey, I have millions of dollars. It's stuck in this account. I just need you to pay this fee so that my bank will release it. Jacob, I'm going to send you $1 million of my $10 million if you just send me 10,000. Does that sound like a good deal?
Sounds too good to be true.
Too good to be true. And it is too good to be true because those are all scams and no one will ever send you the $1 million. If you send that 10,000, they're going to ask for 20,000 and keep asking you to pay and you'll never get the payout. So those scams prey on human nature, on people seeing an opportunity. And unfortunately, if it is too good to be true, it almost certainly is. Cashier's check fraud. Consumers, businesses often place a different set of value on a cashier's check versus a personal check. Unfortunately, fraudsters have been able to figure out how to create counterfeit checks that look very close to a real cashier's check. So you just by looking at a counterfeit cashier's check, you cannot be certain that it's legitimate or not. And in many cases, those two schemes are tied together. So I might have a really nice couch set that I put up for sale because I don't need it anymore. I bought a smaller house, I'm downsizing, and this thing is huge. So I want to sell it, and I'm going to sell it for $1,500. Really nice couch, right? So I get a check for $2,000, and the buyer from some online marketplace says, "Oh, I paid you a little extra. Can you just send me the difference via Zelle or send me the difference through PayPal or something?" It doesn't matter what payment product they want to get the funds back on. If I deposit that $2,000 check in my account and then see that it cleared my account and say, "Oh, it must have been good," and I send the difference back to that fraudster, I guarantee that check is going to come back as fraudulent within a few days, maybe within a month, whenever the victim whose account that check was drawn on checks their balance and says, "Hey, where's my $2,000?" and reports it as fraudulent to their bank. So you can't really trust a check, especially a check provided to you by a stranger online. So identity theft is a huge part of this explosion in fraud. In many cases, even when there's financial fraud involved, it's also identity theft because the bad guys need to assume trust. They need to assume someone else's identity and then use that identity to abuse the trust that their victim has in that identity to then perpetrate the financial fraud scheme. We'll get into that in just a little bit. Before that, I did want to talk about phishing, which is probably, unfortunately, one of the most common scams that are out there. Phishing can take many different forms. Most frequently, you get a phishing email. It might have an offer that's too good to be true, that $1 million from the Nigerian prince. Maybe it has an unexpected attachment or a link. So I get an email, maybe that email is from someone I know, and they say, "Hey, Mike, check this out. It's so funny." And there's a PDF attached or a Word document or some other file. Well, if I open that file and maybe it says funnything.pdf.exe, it could infect my computer. If my computer is not patched, maybe it's a legitimate looking document, but it's actually doing something behind the scenes that I don't want to happen on my machine. Perhaps it's a link. So you get the email, there's a picture, it says click here to view the document. And when you go to that link, it takes you to a website that does something you don't want it to do. These phishing emails can be very convincing. Perhaps it's an email that purports to be from a service provider I use, and it says, unless I click the link, my account is going to be deleted. Well, I might have some emotional investment in that account. Maybe I didn't check the sending address and make sure it's actually from who it says it's from, or the person who I believe sent it to me. their email got hacked. So it could be from the email address I would expect, but it's an unexpected link, something I'm not really expecting to receive. I click on it to find out what it is, and that's when they get me. Um, Perhaps it's a strange or abrupt request. Hey, do you have a moment to help me out with something, Jacob? And I sent you an email. You say, yeah, sure, what's going on? And then I say, hey, give me a call, and I give you a phone number. Maybe it's not the right phone number. You call me and now you're talking to a fraudster. Perhaps I send a request asking you to, um, real quickly, hey, I've got this situation. I need a gift card. Can you just help me out for $200? And they use that stolen identity, the sender identity that you think you received the email from, to abuse that trust to then get some sort of financial gain or gain access to your email or social media or other accounts. So when we get these emails, don't take the bait. If the offer's too good to be true, it is too good to be true. Don't click unexpected links or open unexpected attachments. And really, I wouldn't respond to strange or abrupt requests. If you think the strange request might be authentic, call a number you know. Don't call the number listed in the email. And there's more information at staysafeonline.org. It's a great website. They run some annual campaigns around cybersecurity, as well as currently in April, it is personal, oh, I forgot the name, Data Security Month. Anyway, uh, moving into the other scams. Um,
Financial literacy, man. Yeah,
Financial literacy. Thank you,
yeah.
Jacob.
No, all good, all good. And
I should have written it down.
I just want to chime in because you think, oh, I would never get fooled from somebody impersonating, one of my employees, one of my colleagues. But it's incredible. At the end of this, I know Mike has a slide on AI and what it can do, and it's just incredible the impersonation techniques that are now available and how vigilant we have to be on that front.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I had mentioned identity theft being a key part of many of these scams. Well, really, those are imposter events, right? And there are a number of imposter scams affecting Alaskans and really folks worldwide right now, particularly in America, as we are often targets of many of these fraud campaigns. The tech support scams going around right now, I have an example on this slide of a pop-up that someone may receive. It says your computer has some sort of threat or a virus or some suspicious activity. Call this number to get help. Well, if you call that number, it's a scammer, and they're going to try to charge you $500, $5,000, some exorbitant amount of money to quote unquote fix your computer. And they threaten some sort of consequence. If you try to fix this, your computer is going to be broken. So they're trying to coerce you into following the directions on the screen. You never want to do that. You want to call your own support, an authentic, actual, real company that provides computer services. Maybe you have a computer technician that you already use, or some sort of legitimate company that provides those services. In many cases, if you actually had a virus, an antivirus program might help. Anti-malware programs. I would never actually call the number from one of these pop-ups because they will try to con you. And once they have your phone number, they'll keep targeting you with more calls. Now, these scams range from tech support to government imposters. You might have a phone call, email, or text coming from someone purporting to be with the IRS during tax season. It's a great opportunity for the bad guys because people are thinking about taxes to pretend to be the Internal Revenue Service. You might also receive very convincing phone calls purporting to be from the DEA or the FBI, alleging that you've been involved in some sort of crime. And in order to avoid arrest, you need to make some sort of immediate payment. And I guarantee that is not how law enforcement agencies operate. They are not going to solicit you to make payments to avoid arrest. But again, these are very convincing fraudsters. And in these can be very sad incidences. They will sometimes impersonate your family, or they may impersonate you and call your family members. So a a grandparent or an elder receiving a call from a grandchild saying that they're in jail and they need to post bail and they just need $10,000, um, or any other play on that scheme can unfortunately net those bad guys a very big payment. Um, and I have more on that in a little bit.
Mike, before you move on, just
Sure.
we had a quick question here on, you had mentioned malware software. Can you speak to your recommendations on malware or antivirus software?
Yeah, I'll actually address that in more detail a little bit later. Um, but essentially,
Thank
just to
you.
absolutely, yeah, and just to recap what I mean by malware. So we kind of have an example of a pop-up on this slide here with the tech support scam, right? Malware is any malicious software. So it's something installed or running on your computer that you did not intend to run that's malicious. It's something that wants to take advantage of you or your computer to conduct some sort of illicit act. So whether the malware is a virus that's simply out to destroy, or perhaps it's a remote access Trojan or a rat where the bad guy can get access to the computer and see what you see. Maybe it's a browser hijacking tool, as in the case of this pop-up, where perhaps I was running an older browser that hadn't been updated yet. And I went to a website maybe that was malicious, or I went to a normal non-malicious website and it served up an advertisement, a malicious advertisement that had a browser hijack in it. Then the browser gets taken over. I can't get out of the browser. It tells me my computer's infected. Um, at that point, I would generally recommend disconnect the computer from the internet and contact a technician to assist you. But any malicious software is really malware, and you really do want to have tools on your computer to protect you from that, whether that's antivirus, anti-malware software. Microsoft has made great strides in advancing the capabilities of Microsoft Defender. So there's a lot of different options. Macs as well can be the victim of viruses. So just because you're using a Mac OS device does not mean that you're impervious to viruses or malware. So, you do want to have several layers of protection if possible.
Thank you very much. And thank you for
Absolutely.
the questions. If you please keep those questions coming. If you
Yeah.
want, we'll answer some of them as during the presentation, then we'll save some for the end. But please use this opportunity to ask those questions. Thanks.
Yeah, I love the questions. Keep them coming. So we're talking about impersonation scams, and I had mentioned tax season, so I'd be remiss not to dig into the IRS a little more. Although the bad guys, as you can see on the picture here with our FBI agent, can impersonate any government agency, not just the IRS. If you do receive an IRS impersonation scam attempt, you might see some indicators that it's not legitimate, such as you have not received a demand letter. Well, the IRS is never going to start contacting you with a phone call. They will always start with a letter. So if you've never received a letter and you suddenly get a phone call with the caller ID saying IRS, that's a red flag that something is not quite right. And then when the caller talks to you and demands an immediate payment and threatens jail time or arrest, and then further asks that that payment be made with prepaid gift cards, that's a sure sign that this is a scam. If that happens, hang up. Don't argue with them. Don't give them information. Don't say, I already paid my taxes or anything else. You don't want to provide any information to these fraudsters. Just hang up the phone. And there's a lot more information at ftc.gov/imposters. Now, a very sad scam that unfortunately has been growing exponentially for the past few years are these romance scams. As you can see on the slide here, the number of losses reported have continued to grow year over year. 5 or 6 years ago, it was at less than 100 million. Within the past 2 years, it exceeded 1 billion in consumer losses. These romance scams are not going away. They're here to stay. And the victims can be any age or demographic. These victims having fallen for the romance scam is not a sign or indicator of lack of intelligence or lack of educational attainment or of anything else other than they were targeted by a very convincing con artist. These romance scams are very painful for the victims, and the perpetrators are extremely convincing. They're con artists who do that as their day job. So they spend 8 hours a day or more working to convince a number of victims that they are in love. They will spend weeks, months, sometimes a year or more convincing their would-be victim that they truly have some sort of real, honest connection with them, some emotional tie, and then they ask them for money. So if you have someone that you've met through social media, online, on a dating site, and you've never met them in person, and they suddenly start asking you for money, it's a scam. Don't send money to someone you've never actually met. These online relationships can feel real, but I guarantee if someone is asking you for money, and even if they say that it's to fly to meet you, oh, well, I'm trying to buy a ticket. Can you cover the cost? Oh, sure. And you send $2,000. And oh, well, my customs, I have to pay. I'm bringing you these great gifts, but I have to pay customs. And you send some more money. Oh, well, now I have to pay an export tax and send some more money. And it just keeps going. And if they, for somehow you bought a flight for them, they're going to say that they got stuck in the airport. Oh, they need some more money. Now they're stuck at the transfer airport and they missed their flight and they need a hotel, and it just never ends. And the asks for money grow increasingly larger and larger. And again, the victims can be any age, any gender, any educational attainment. The breakdown is almost flat. It's all types of people who can be victims of this scam, any one of us. So just if someone online is asking you for money, don't send it.
Mike, before
Yes.
we move on, I just wanted to stop just for a moment to talk about the prevalency of some of these. We've talked about, the IRS scam, the impersonation, romance, and you think, looking at it in a presentation like this, you think, oh, I wouldn't fall for something like this. But how prevalent are these, in
Well,
terms of Alaska and nationally?
it's certainly happening in Alaska to likely hundreds of victims a year. Nationally, there were over 70,000 victims who reported it in 2022 for $1.3 billion in losses. That's billion with a B. So the fraudsters are earning billions of dollars a year on these fraud schemes, and they are reinvesting those funds into things like call centers to answer phone calls from victims to pretend to be the person who's messaging them. And as I'll mention at the end of the presentation with AI, um, as I had mentioned with the cybercrime forums, the barrier to entry for this fraud market has lowered. So, it's very prevalent, and I expect it to continue to grow exponentially over the next few years. So anyone could be a target, and it can be any age. So it's your parents, your grandparents, your kids. Anyone can be targeted by these scammers. And you might think that you're not someone who could be a victim, but again, they're very convincing con artists, and they look for people who are looking for love, and then they sink in their hook.
I
So
guess that just speaks to how convincing they are. So,
yeah,
Michael, I did want to say we saw your question. We're gonna answer that one at the end. Thank you for asking.
awesome. Now, speaking of these con artists, they can also pretend to be you. So the con artists have started, these fraudsters will identify who the payroll clerk at a given company is. They will then steal the identity of an employee. So if my information, let's say, was in that AT&T data breach that we talked about earlier, then the bad guy could look me up, go find who the payroll person is at my employer, and send that payroll clerk an email saying, hey, I need to change my direct deposit information. Can you send me the form? And if the HR department responds with the form, the bad guy will fill it out with all of my personal details and they'll answer all the questions correctly because they've stolen my identity. And then they'll send in the information and just wait for payday. So if you don't receive your payroll, let your business know right away. And what businesses can do to avoid this is use a secure system to submit payroll change requests and not accept payroll change requests via email. And so there's some information on that on the IRS, on the FBI's website, Internet Crime Complaint Center, ic3.gov, as well as other scams and texts. Now we've talked about phishing, phone calls, texts. It doesn't matter what method the communication comes via. If you're receiving time-sensitive notices or requests to click a link or an attachment, perhaps requests for payment or requests for account details, those are red flags of fraud. And particularly if it's a request to immediately make a payment or provide your login information from your bank, banks never ask that. We run a campaign every year with that hashtag banks never ask that, with some really funny videos. If you ever look up that hashtag, you'll see some good information on whatever social media or web tools you use. Now, the tactics that these fraudsters are using, I've talked about this a little bit, but I just want to kind of hammer home what they're doing. They establish trust, whether that's because they stole someone's identity, maybe they hijacked an email account and now they're using someone's legitimate email account to send out links or to make requests, to send urgent demands. They take that trust and then they apply urgency. You have to act now, and they threaten consequences. Otherwise, you're going to jail. So send us money with this gift card. These tactics fall true across all of the different scams that I was talking about. The romance scam, that you trust them because you're dating them. They've applied urgency because they're flying to meet you. There's consequences. They might not catch their flight. They're demanding payment. They're stuck in the airport. They need to pay some sort of fee to get through. So those tactics work, and they unfortunately repeat themselves over and over. So just to talk through some of those techniques, we talked about the grandchild calling with a travel emergency. You trust your grandchild, it's urgent, there's an emergency, and the consequence is something negative could happen to that individual. The IRS or FBI agent threatening arrest unless you pay. Your online romance, maybe they aren't trying to travel to meet you, but they have some sort of special deal. They're going to give you a time limited investment. They've got a super great deal on cryptocurrency. Don't trust it. So one of the key factors and one of the techniques that the fraudsters use very intentionally is they will demand specific forms of payment. They want a gift card because they know that it's hard for you to get that gift card canceled in time before they can spend it. They want Bitcoin because it's untraceable, or they think it's untraceable, and it's impossible to recall the funds. Similarly, they want a bank wire or a money order because, again, it's good funds payments and very difficult to recall if you then later come to your bank or to the money order processing company and say, oh, actually, this was fraud. I didn't want to send that. It's often too late. It's like you handed cash to someone. So how can we protect ourselves from these scams, from these cyber risks? Well, we need to be cyber secure. We have to have good cyber hygiene in our lives. So you want to use strong, unique passwords. So don't use the same password on every website. As much as it may be tempting to do so, that leaves you open to attack. And a strong password is one that doesn't use a simple, easily guessed word. It should be multiple different things, factors like numbers, letters, symbols. There is something to be said about passphrases where you may have a very long password that's easier to remember because it's a disconnected set of words. There's a funny online comic with an example called Correct Horse Battery Staple. Don't use that one. It's publicly available on the internet. but you have a string of words that would be hard to guess, and a very long password is much more secure than a short password. And in addition to passwords, use multi-factor authentication. This is where you have a token or a code, or perhaps you receive an SMS text when you log into the website that validates your identity. Um, you want to make sure you patch all of your devices and software. And when I say all of your devices, I do mean all devices, those smart devices or IoT, Internet of Things devices as well. So not only do you need to patch your computer when Windows or Mac have an update come through, but your phone, maybe your internet router or Wi-Fi device, your fridge now, apparently, your smart TV, don't wait on those patches. In many cases, when a patch is available, the fraudsters are already taking advantage of unpatched devices. So you do
Hey,
want to apply security patches right away.
Mike, I want to jump in. Could you
Yeah,
explain a little bit more? What is a patch?
yeah. So um, when a software manufacturer develops a product, they put out a piece of software or a computer or any other sort of thing, a cell phone. They make mistakes when they're coding that software. We're humans make mistakes, right? So there will be some sort of insecure flaw or vulnerability in the software when you get it, but no one's found the flaw yet. Once someone finds it, security researchers tend to report those flaws to the manufacturer. This gives the person who wrote the software the opportunity to fix it. So they will put out a patch that says, oh, when you get a text with this special code, it actually lets the bad guy take over the phone. So we're going to put out a patch that stops that code from working. Well, if I get that update notification on my phone and I say, ah, I don't want to apply this right now, I'm too busy. And then I get that text with the special code. If I haven't applied the patch to fix the flaw, my phone could get taken over. And so those patches are very important to apply when those software updates become available for your devices.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And actually, we have
Absolutely.
two questions on the slide already. So when you get to the
Sure.
end, we'll jump into those.
Yeah, yeah, I'm almost there. Um, Aside from the technical aspects there, we can all limit the data we share online. So if I'm traveling on vacation and I'm posting public videos and photos of the beautiful beaches and waves and sun and just rubbing the salt in the wound of all my friends and family back in Alaska dealing with the snow and the cold, that there might be a certain level of, I don't know, schadenfreude from that, some joy you get out of rubbing that in, or maybe it's less rubbing your friends, but just sharing the beauty of this wonderful cove that you've found, and that's all well and good. But I've tagged my location as wherever I'm at, and I've set my privacy settings to be public on these posts that I've made showing this beautiful beach. And the bad guy who's been looking at my identity to steal it sees that I'm traveling and they know the location I'm at because I've posted it and tagged it. They now know now is the time to act, and they're going to go contact my parents and pretend to be me and say that I have a travel emergency, and they know enough details to pretend to be me. um, so if we limit the data we share, we limit the attack surface, we limit the knowledge that we give those potential would-be fraudsters who might target us to steal our identities. And be wary of websites and ads. We cannot trust everything you see online. And in particular, I've seen this happening more and more. When you search something on a search website, whether it's Google or Bing or anything else, the bad guys are now taking their malware and they're getting it advanced in the search engine optimization so that their results sometimes show before the legitimate results of the software. So if I'm looking up a certain piece of software and I type in the name of that software in Google, the first thing that shows up might say it's an ad, and it might not actually be the software I'm looking for. So then you go to install something like an antivirus program and you actually get a virus. So be wary of ads and of websites, particularly if they're not legitimate. You'd mentioned there was some questions.
Yeah, jumping right in. Do you recommend using a password manager, or how do you store your password securely?
Absolutely. Yes. Password manager all the way. I think I don't have the exact source for this to cite this, but I think the last thing I read on it was the average person has something like 50 passwords. So there's no way you could remember 50 unique passwords. And a password manager will help you do that. It will also, in some cases, help you generate random passwords. So there's certainly a lot of utility in using a password manager. There are a lot of different options out there. So, I can't really recommend a particular password manager. I can recommend do your due diligence, look into the company that's providing the password manager, evaluate the features. Does it provide all of the different capabilities that you need? And is it at the level of security that you want? There's a lot of different factors to consider. Is it cloud-based? Can you access it from everywhere? Is that something that's good in your book, or is that something that's bad? That's a personal decision up to you. There's some password managers that are local only, but then if the device you have it stored on becomes broken, well, what do you do now? So you do want to make sure that you choose the right solution for yourself. And if it is a stored locally only password manager, make sure you've got a backup.
Thank you very much. The other
Yeah.
question involved the multi-factor authentication.
Hmm.
We see text multi-factor authentications, apps, phone calls.
Yeah.
Which of those is the best? I guess the
Well,
other the question.
it's
Or,
there's certainly a mixed bag. Again, like every decision, there's pros and cons. So um, from consumer sentiment surveys, I've read that most people prefer SMS text as a matter of convenience. Um, as far as security, the apps are likely a little more secure than an SMS text. But the con there is, again, if I break my phone or lose it and I lose that app, have I saved, have I backed it up? Have I saved the restore codes to get it installed on a new device? Or have I lost my multi-factor now when that device is destroyed? So you want to make sure you take the appropriate steps to not lose access to your app if you use an authentication app. The SMS texts, it can be good. It's convenient. You've got your phone, but it can be bad if a bad guy goes to your phone provider, pretends to be you, steals your identity, and then redirects your phone to their phone. And that has happened in the case of some high-profile cryptocurrency thefts. So these cyber heists, the bad guys know people are using multi-factor authentication. If you know that you're a target and you've got a large amount of money behind a cryptocurrency wallet, you might want something better than a text authentication.
is the gist of it though that no matter what it is, text, phone, app, the point is to use multi-authentication opposed to
Yes.
not. That's kind of okay.
Yes, and that could include answering questions, security questions. I do advise not to answer security questions with commonly easily identifiable information. So one trick, in my password manager, I have the questions and answers that I put for my questions. And so if someone asks on a website your mother's maiden name, perhaps I gave them a fake answer and I wrote down in my password manager what that fake answer was. There are certain other common questions that get asked where I have a common fake answer that I might give. That way, if someone researches me on, I don't know, genealogy.com or whatever website lets you look at your family history, and they pretend to be me to log in to get my mother's maiden name, it's not going to help them answer that question. So multi-factor authentication, as you mentioned, can be a phone call, a text message, a question answer prompt, or a secure app. And there's a lot of different options there. It can also be a physical token in some cases.
Thank you.
Great questions. Moving right on, we do want to safeguard our finances as well. So we don't want to trust any unexpected requests for payment. Again, those are a red flag. If we're not expecting a request for payment, we shouldn't be sending money. If we do receive an account change request, we want to call back a known number. So if someone tells me, hey, I normally receive funds at this bank account, 12345 6 at such and such bank, and now all of a sudden it's this other bank account at a different bank. Well, that's a sign that the fraudster may have taken over their email and they're asking me to divert the funds to an account the fraudster controls. If I pick up my phone and call the number I've got in my address book for that person, as opposed to the number listed in the email, and say, hey, Bob, did you change your account? And he says, no, I don't know what you're talking about. Well, Bob's email might have gotten hacked. So always call back a known number to verify changes. And if you're making payments, check them against a valid source document. So if I know that I'm going to be making a payment, there's certain contract terms to which I've agreed. The contract may stipulate where the payment goes. I don't want to accept any sort of non-contractually valid change. So if you're closing on a house and all of a sudden a realtor, title company, or someone in an email says, oh, the payment needs to go somewhere else instead, well, you've got documents that tell you where the payment should go. I would not deviate from the agreed upon contract, your valid source document. Monitor your account activity. And if your financial institution offers it, set up real-time alerts. Most banks, credit unions, and fintechs offer, fintech, by the way, is a financial technology company. They might not actually be a bank, but they offer some sort of payment service. Most of them offer alerts. So if I receive some sort of unexpected debit or someone pulls money out of my account and I wasn't expecting it, I'm going to get an alert that tells me, hey, something came out of my account, that lets me then check it right away. Um, Definitely check your statements on your accounts as well regularly. And above and beyond that, you can check your credit report for free at annualcreditreport.com. One trick with the annual credit report is there's 3 different major credit agencies in the United States, and you can actually ask for each one of them. So instead of pulling all 3 credit reports at once, you can set a calendar reminder every 4 months and check one, then the other, and that'll give you a more regular monitoring of your credit. Of course, there's paid services that give you credit monitoring. There may be some free services. If you've been the victim of a data breach, the entity whose data was breached may have offered you free credit monitoring for a period of time. And I certainly encourage folks to take advantage of that. One thing that folks may consider doing, again, there's pros and cons to any decision you make. You can also freeze your credit. Now, it's important to remember if you've frozen your credit, that stops a bad guy from using your credit. It also stops you from using your credit. So you don't want to freeze your credit when you're in the process of closing on a house. You don't want to freeze your credit if you're about to ask for a loan. But you can thaw your credit so you can unfreeze it, conduct your financial transaction, and then freeze it again. And that stops bad guys from stealing your identity and using your credit against your will. And as you receive those real-time financial alerts or check your account balances, you want, or if you see something on your credit report that doesn't belong, you want to report fraud right away. So reacting quickly can protect you from financial loss. You see something on your credit card that doesn't make sense. You were shopping somewhere in downtown Anchorage, and then all of a sudden there's Adidas being purchased in New York City. Call your bank, call your card issuer, have them shut that down, report it as fraud right away if you suspect fraud. Notify law enforcement. If someone commits a crime against you, file a police report against that person, particularly if there's a large loss. We talked about some of those different scams and schemes, such as the imposter schemes, the IRS and FBI imposters, the romance scams. Those things can be reported either to the FTC or to the FBI through Internet Crime Complaint Center, IC3.gov. Lastly, I just wanted to touch on a few developing technologies in the last couple of minutes we have here. I would be remiss not to mention artificial intelligence with all the headlines it's been grabbing over the past 6 months to a year. Um, right now, most folks, when they think about AI, they're talking about conversational AI or a large language model where you type in something and the AI spits back a nice paragraph to you. Unfortunately, the fraudsters are using AI and they're using it to generate very convincing fraud emails. If I'm a fraudster who doesn't speak English or doesn't speak English well, I can put into an AI model, develop an email as if I'm a CEO asking someone to send money to this bank account, and the AI will spit out the fraud email for me, and then I copy paste it into the phishing email. And so that really has lowered the barrier to entry for the crime because they don't even have to even speak the language to be able to send fraud emails. Now, other uses of AI, and some of these are very concerning, include deep fakes or these deep fake videos. I did see one report of a individual, a company in a foreign country, where the individual who was the victim of the crime logged into a teleconference meeting, and AI had replaced the CEO and other chief executives within the company, and they convinced this person in the accounting or finance area to send money to fraudsters' accounts. And so these deep fakes can be used to pretend to be politicians or celebrities or perhaps even people you know. And so really, these developing technologies are on the cusp of some very dangerous, being used in some very dangerous schemes and scams, and I expect we'll see more of that over the coming years. And finally, there's cryptocurrency, whether that's Bitcoin or some other coin. Again, cryptocurrency is potentially risky. It's a target of theft. It's not FDIC insured, and it is at risk of being the target of theft, loss, or scams. You'd mentioned there was an AI question, I think, Jacob.
That was me speaking to the prevalence of AI earlier. I do. AI is a very interesting topic because not only does it increase the risk factor, but there also is the benefits that come with AI as well. So maybe it'd be great if you could speak to how it helps us
Well, certainly. You
combat
know,
that.
there's AI baked into various apps and tools that we all use. So if I'm writing a letter or an email and something tells me I've made a grammatical error, you know, that's kind of a type of AI. Modern AI models, they're really just fancy autocomplete is what they are. So when we're conducting some sort of activity and we make a mistake, AI can often spot that mistake. In the security world and in the finance world, we've been using AI for years. We use things called heuristic algorithms that look at trends and activities, identify anomalies. You might have AI involved in identifying malicious network traffic, or AI that identifies anomalous activity on a computer, or perhaps AI that helps monitor and identify a fraudulent transaction and help prevent someone from taking a loss. So there's certainly a good side to the coin of AI, but like any tool, it can be used for good or for bad. Well, I
Thank you
think
very
we've
much.
kind of just got a couple minutes left, or a minute for questions. So,
Yeah, so we
um,
did have a couple questions that were generated throughout this presentation, and I do want to take a moment to answer these questions. I'm expecting it to go about 10 minutes after. I know everyone's time is tight, and I want to be respectful of that. So if you do need to log off, we will post a recording of this webinar on our website, and I'll show that URL at the end. But if you just go to our website, you'll be able to find that recording. So with that, Mike, I'm going to jump into these questions. We can finish up about 10 minutes early here, or 10 minutes late here. The first one being, I was hoping you could just explore a little bit more on AI. And can you speak briefly on where AI might get data for the deep faking the people, or how does it learn about us?
Well, I've personally seen deepfake videos made of politicians, and it's very easy to tell where they might get that data. Politicians go out and speak publicly. They're on YouTube and TV news and everywhere else under the sun you can imagine, trying to get elected or talking about things. And the bad guys can basically take any video source, input it into the AI model, tell it change things this way, and then the AI model puts out a new video. So, someone could likely take any recording of any online video and turn it into an AI deep fake of someone seemingly authentically saying something that they never said. And that could include social media posting. So,
Thank you. So this is a question that was asked earlier on that I wanted to get to. Will you address the risk benefits of virtual payment apps like Venmo, PayPal, or Zelle?
sure. Um, well, so you have payment apps, which may be provided through a fintech or may be provided through your bank, or your bank may have partnered with a fintech. There's a couple of different ways that can go down. Um, there are some benefits to using these apps. They're convenient, it's fast. In many cases, in particular Zelle, you don't want to pay people you don't know with these apps. It's like handing cash to someone. So you wouldn't want to use Zelle to purchase a product. You wouldn't, especially a product someone's going to be shipping to you, because they may never ship it and you're not necessarily going to have payment buyer purchaser protections. If you're using an app like PayPal, which PayPal's, to my knowledge, is not a bank, they're a fintech, funds that PayPal's holding for you. I don't believe that they're FDIC insured like a bank deposit is. So there's some risk. PayPal's been around for a while. But if you are using PayPal to pay someone for a product, good, or service, then you want to use the option that says that you're using it to purchase something, because then that gives you some buyer protections. When you pay something with a credit card, maybe your credit card has a chip or a stripe. You want to use the chip instead of the stripe. Or if your card offers virtual card numbers and you're buying something online, those are always great because it protects your real card number. And in those product purchases or services purchases, there's usually some sort of buyer protection with those types of payment methods. And that allows you the right as a consumer to contest the charge. So understand the terms and conditions of the service that you're using and use the correct option when making your payment so that you retain as many of the consumer protections as possible.
Thank you. I appreciate it. The next question here is there insurance against identity theft? And do you have any recommendations? And I know we can't give specific recommendations, but maybe do you recommend using some insurance?
I would certainly recommend talking with your insurance broker. I think it's insurance gets into a really complex web of different things that may or may
Yeah,
not be available. So I don't really feel qualified to answer that question from a personal basis. From a business perspective, there certainly is cyber insurance. And so businesses that do have a certain level of cyber risk would be well served to look into cyber insurance for their business operations. The questionnaires to get cyber insurance have become increasingly complex and prescriptive. So you do need to have a fairly sophisticated IT operation in many cases to get a good rate on cyber insurance or to even be insurable for cyber insurance. But that is a market that does exist for businesses, and I would talk to your insurance broker about any personal coverage they may offer.
thank you. Next question here is, what are your thoughts regarding personal information removal, data removal broker services?
Um, you know, uh, I've seen there are certainly some services out there that will try to scrub data from the internet. Um, it, How effective they are, I'm not certain. I could weigh in on that. I do know there are some scam websites out there that will list people's data and then purport to remove the data for a fee. That really seems like extortion to me. And in many cases, I've read reports that some of those services then repost the data to them after the fact. There was a great investigative article posted by Brian Krebs on security. He's a longtime security researcher and news article, was part of the Washington Post cyber beat for a while, and now operates independently. He has great articles on many of these topics, and he covered a particular data service that appears to be linked to, let's just say, some foreign nationals of ill repute, and did exactly that, where they charge you money to remove your personal information, and then later on that personal information shows back up on the site. So I would be careful.
Thank you. Two more questions, and then we'll finish it up here. So, with the recent leak, what steps should I take if I'm an AT&T customer?
So AT&T and former AT&T customers, there was 70 million data records in that data set. That data set purported to be from around 2019, per some of the reporting I saw. You know, the data involved includes the information that AT&T had. So that's phone numbers, email addresses, full names, date of birth, social security number, passcodes like your PIN numbers. So if you reused your PIN number anywhere, I would go change that. You know, be on alert for phishing emails, phone calls, and text messages to the contact points that they had listed for you. Those attackers may know your identity and information about you. If you have any service providers that use date of birth or social security number as the identifier, contact them, make sure that they enhance their security protocols so that they have something more secure, because that information is essentially public. You know, there are a number of steps you can take to try and raise awareness amongst your friends and family to these schemes. So if someone purports to be you and contacts a family member pretending to be you asking for money, make sure they know that you won't do that. And if they get that call, to hang up and call your number directly. You know, just be on alert is really the best thing. And if you have credit monitoring, or if you haven't checked your credit in a while, make sure you're checking it, or that you have that monitoring active, and that you look into it.
Thank you. All right, final question. If you could recommend just one thing that everyone on this call should do to help protect themselves and be more cyber secure, what would that one thing be?
Sure. You know, I'll give one thing. If you're someone who has used the same password on all these different websites that we have to remember passwords for, and you've used the same one, no matter how secure you think it is, go change it. If you're not that person, I'll give you one thing, which is patch your devices. If you have a security patch waiting on your computer at home, apply that patch. Let it do the reboot. It's okay. It's worth doing. Patch your phone, patch your computer, patch your smart TV, patch your Wi-Fi if you have a firmware update for your router at home. If you have it and it's connected to the internet, you should be patching it, because that's the #1 way to prevent your devices from being hacked. I guess I gave you two things, Jacob, but
That's okay. That's okay. Mike, I want to say thank you so much for presenting today. We have covered a lot of great information, and I very much appreciate your time. Thank you to everyone
absolutely.
who joined us. Your questions made this more of a dynamic discussion, and I know we went a little bit over, but I appreciate those questions. I think that helps with these discussions. We encourage you to learn as much as you can about how to protect yourself and your data from fraud and cybercrimes. On the screen, you'll see the top URL is a web page that we stood up that presents some of the digital services that can help protect you. It goes over the Banks Never Ask That National Anti-Fraud Initiative, and it also has some videos on fraud and cybercrime prevention, including a copy of this webinar, which we'll be posting to the website, this webpage, within the next 24 hours or so. I encourage you to also check out the bottom URL, which is for which is where we'll post previous webinars as well as upcoming webinars. With that, thank you very much. I appreciate your indulgence as we went about 10 minutes over, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you for attending.